Good morning. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the Monday Message. Each week, we take a few minutes to reflect on leadership, character, and the choices that shape who we become as members of the public safety community, parents, spouses, teammates, coworkers, and neighbors. These are not lectures or perfect answers. They are simply observations from a career in public service and lessons I have learned along the way, with the hope that they challenge all of us to think a little differently as we begin a new week. This is your first time listening. I'm Dan Dillon. I spent more than 3 decades in public service, and every Monday I share a few thoughts on leadership, character, and living a life of purpose. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get started. Today I want to talk about risk, not because risk is something we can avoid, but because risk is something we all have to learn how to recognize. Every decision we make carries some level of risk. The question is not whether risk exists. The question is, are we paying enough attention to it to see it coming? Recently, I was out riding my adventure motorcycle in the mountains west of Boulder. The plan was to ride toward Rollins Pass, a rocky dirt road, and eventually make my way to the old collapsed tunnel area. It was one of those days that reminds you of why you love being outside. The views were incredible. The air was crisp. The kind of ride where you can clear your mind and simply enjoy being present. As I continued higher into the mountains, the conditions started changing. The trail became more difficult, the terrain became less forgiving, and eventually I reached a decision point. I had a choice. I could continue forward. I could tell myself that I had already come this far. I could push a little harder. I could convince myself that turning around meant I had failed. Or I could recognize that conditions had changed. I could make a decision based on the reality in front of me, and I could come back another day. I chose to turn around. Honestly, that decision stayed with me for a while because there was a part of me that really wanted to continue, and I felt defeated not continuing on. Not because it was necessarily the right decision, but because we all have that voice inside of us that says, "You're already here, don't quit now, just keep going." But sometimes wisdom is knowing the difference between perseverance and stubbornness. We often celebrate persistence. We admire people who refuse to quit, and there is something admirable about grit. But there is another kind of strength that does not receive nearly as much attention: the strength to reassess, the humility to admit that circumstances have changed, and the discipline to make a different decision than the one you had planned to make. Too often we confuse commitment with refusing to change course. We think that because we made a decision yesterday, we have to defend it today. Real maturity is recognizing that new information should lead to better decisions. Turning around is not always giving up. Sometimes it is simply preparing yourself to succeed another day. One of the hardest things about managing risk is that consequences are usually invisible. We rarely know the problems our decisions prevented. No one celebrates the accident that did not happen. No one notices the conversation that prevented a relationship from falling apart. No one sees the temptations you avoided, the shortcuts you did not take, or the decision you made when no one was watching. That is what makes good decisions difficult. There is often no immediate reward. Sometimes the reward is simply that nothing bad happened. That can be frustrating because our minds naturally remember dramatic events. We remember the close calls, we remember the failures, but we rarely stop to appreciate the thousands of ordinary decisions that quietly protected us. Like wearing a seatbelt, getting enough sleep before a long drive, having a difficult conversation before resentment builds, saving money before the emergency happens, going to the doctor before something becomes serious. None of those decisions feel exciting, but they are all there to reduce risk. Most of the best decisions in life never receive applause. They simply allow us to keep living the life we want to live. Most people think about risk after something goes wrong, after the accident, after the diagnosis, after the financial setback, after the relationship falls apart. That is just the point when we start asking questions. What happened? What could I have done differently? How did I not see this coming? But many of life's biggest problems do not begin with one dramatic moment. They begin with small decisions that seem insignificant at the time. A warning sign we ignored, a conversation we avoided, a habit we allowed to continue, a decision we kept postponing. Risk rarely announces itself. Most of the time, it quietly waits for us to stop paying attention. It usually whispers. It whispers through little compromises. I will deal with it tomorrow. One more time will not matter. Nothing bad has happened yet. That's how risk grows. Not through one massive decision, but through dozens of small decisions that slowly become normal. We adapt to what we tolerate. Eventually, what once felt uncomfortable begins to feel routine. That is true in our careers, it's true in our relationships, it's true in our health. The longer we ignore small problems, the more expensive they become. The goal, of course, is not to eliminate risk. The goal is to understand it, respect it, and make decisions with awareness instead of emotion. I have learned that some of the biggest risks in life come from becoming comfortable. Comfort can convince us that because something has always worked, it will always work. Because nothing has happened, nothing will happen. Because we have always done something one way, there is no reason to consider another way. That's how complacency begins. Not with a lack of caring, but with a lack of awareness. I have seen this throughout my career. The procedures people stop following because they've never been hurt. The equipment they stop checking because it's always worked before. The conversation leaders avoid because they do not want conflict. None of those decisions seem significant in the moment until they are. Complacency is dangerous because it disguises itself as experience. We start believing that because we have done something for years, we no longer have to think about it. Experience is valuable, but experience without continued awareness becomes overconfidence. Managing risk is really about paying attention to our health, paying attention to our relationships, paying attention to our responsibilities, paying attention to the people around us. The small decisions we make every day become the foundation of the life we build, like the workout nobody sees, the apology nobody expected, the difficult conversation we choose to have, the discipline we practice when no one was watching. Those moments may never make headlines, but they shape who we become. Those choices build something that is difficult to measure. They build trust. They build resilience. They build confidence that is earned instead of borrowed. Every small decision becomes a vote for the person we are becoming. We often wait for one life-changing moment to transform us. Most of the time, transformation happens quietly. It happens one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one ordinary Monday at a time. Looking back on that motorcycle ride, I'm glad I turned around, not because I was afraid of what was ahead, but because I was paying attention to the clues of what was possible. There will always be another ride, another opportunity, another chance to reach the destination. Sometimes the courageous decision is pushing forward. Sometimes the courageous decision is knowing when to stop. The important thing is understanding the difference. I had to remind myself the destination was still there. The only thing that would have changed by pressing forward was the amount of risk I was willing to ignore. So maybe the question this week is not what risks am I facing? Maybe the better question is what risks am I ignoring? What small decision can I make today that protects tomorrow? None of us will eliminate uncertainty. Life will always involve unknowns, and there will always be situations we cannot predict and outcomes we cannot control. But we can control how attentive we are. We can control whether we are honest with ourselves. We can control whether we are making decisions based off of wisdom, not emotion. We can choose to pause before reacting. We can choose to listen before speaking, and we can choose to prepare instead of assuming everything will work out. Those choices may seem small today. Over time, they become the difference between reacting to life and leading it. Because every choice we make is moving us towards something. The question is, are we moving there intentionally? Manage risk before it manages you. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. If this message challenged you to think a little differently, then our time together was well spent. If it resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who could use a little encouragement this week. Until next Monday, choose the harder right over the easier wrong. Take care of one another, stay curious, lead with purpose, and never stop growing. I'll see you next Monday.